Hello, everyone. My name is Kantida Busaba, and I am a public program creator of Bangkok CITYCITY Gallery, and also oversee this space, which is the project called Bookshop and Library. The concept of this space is to collaborate with artists, writers, and practitioners in co-curating publications in contemporary and debatable issue for distribution. It's also hosting the several public programs since it's opened in 2019, which include the exhibition, workshop, curator talk, book talk, reading group, and even like offsite activities. And today I'm so happy to welcome you all to this public event. It's a talk and interactive game titled POST-CLOCK RATIONALISATIONS and the Immaculate Misconception. Our speaker here, Wassim Alsindi, is the co-founder and the host of the 0xSalon, which conduct experiment in post-disciplinary collective knowledge practice. Wassim is specialized in conceptual design and philosophy of peer-to-peer system, on which he writes, speaks, teaches, and consults. His work not only fosters creative ways of thinking critically, but also introduce new approach to how knowledge can be shared. I find his work particularly significant as it encourages us to expand our perspective and see connection between things more thoroughly. So thank you for being here and welcome, Wassim.
Thank you, Prayo. Thank you, everybody in CityCITY and the library bookshop. So yeah, this is the second of two events we've done here. Last week we played the card game, which is on the table right now. So if you weren't here but you're curious about that, you can come and take a look after this little bit of scheduled programming is over. And I'm going to show you a different creative project that the 0xSalon made a couple of years ago. But first, I want to kind of anchor all of these projects in the, say, theoretical, like the scholarly investigations between theory and practice that I've been engaged in, both myself and collectively, over the last, number of years. Okay, so the talk is called Post-CLOCK RATIONALISATIONS. We have this idea of a post hoc rationalization. And that is when we arrive at an understanding of an event after the fact. So we're doing that post hoc. And it's related to ad hoc, where we're just kind of making it up as we go along, which is also what I'll be doing today. So, but the reason we've slipped from hoc to clock here is because a lot of the material we're going to be talking about has, as one of its kind of conceptual underpinnings, the notion of time. And that's not only the time that governs our lives, the time of the clock and the calendar, but perhaps even new forms of processing the occurrences of events and finding a way to order those and preserve a memory of that. So we'll get to that in a minute. So just like a real quick survey of some of the materials that I've written in the last few years, which went into, let's say, both the theoretical work and the creative stuff that you'll see as we go on. So I'm an editor at MIT's Law Journal, which is called the Computational Law Report. And so I write a column there, and it's about the misadventures in certain flavors of technology governance. You can see a Pepe meme in the corner there. And I know we're in Asia, we're not that far from Hong Kong, I guess. And I'm sure many are doubtless aware of Pepe manifesting as a symbol in the umbrella revolutions. So Pepe became a symbol for freedom. In the West, Pepe is much maligned. So whenever I show this slide in Europe or America, I tell people to decolonize their notions of Pepe before we carry on. I write sometimes in the publications of the art world. So, for example, Spike Art magazine, which is a German-Austrian publication, had a Web3 issue a couple of years ago at the height of the NFT mania in 21-22, and wrote the feature essay of that magazine, which was called The Revolution Will Not Be Tokenized. It was a critical look at the tokenization of digital art. On this time topic that I just mentioned, in 2021, there was a piece about new forms of time being created through the paradigm of blockchain technology in this article, Reminiscences of a Clock Operator. I wrote about the social cult of Bitcoin, which is especially important and relevant to the performance we're going to do in the second half of the event. And that's Necro-Primitivism Rising in the Journal of Algorithm. And the kind of capstone of the machine time research was when myself and a couple of colleagues co-wrote the foreword to the book version of Anna Greenspan's PhD thesis, which was arguably the most important text to come out of Warwick in the era of the CCRU, the Cybernetic Cultural Research Unit, which gave rise to this concept of accelerationism, which has touched a lot of people's lives. All right, and then most recently, I've been working on what you could say is a decolonial take on some of the new territorial drives and urges that are coming out of the technology emboldened and enriched right. Okay, so just say something quickly about the Salon. So it's a collective project. We started about 5 years ago in Berlin in an artist-run space that's actually not that different to this one, called Trust. And we were just sitting around the table talking about stuff. We thought that the conversations were really good, and maybe there'd be a way that we could develop the kind of intimacy of like a round table, like a sitting around with your friends, but add, let's say, some theoretical structure to that, and also some protocols to create a deliberately unstructured space for these conversations. So we invite around 25 people to these conversations. We pick a topic, we research that together, we pick out some materials which people might or might not look at, and then we have this like unstructured conversation for up to about 90 minutes, 2 hours. And so a community formed around these events in the early days of the pandemic and into the pandemic. And when we started getting commissioned to make art projects or getting funding, we then had like this pool of incredible people, incredible kind of wild creative scene of Berlin at our fingertips. So it was a happy accident. Well, certainly wasn't by design, very happy accident. And it meant that we could kind of hit the ground running and actually put together quite ambitious, quite wild projects. I'm going to show you some of those. So here's some of the topics that we discuss at the 0xSalon, and these range from, I guess, like quite kind of tooling, let's say, philosophical tooling, things like concepts like abstraction, things like interdisciplinarity, things like realism. And then we moved on to look at things like entanglements between nature and technology, the techno-divination, memetics, the virus itself, and then these other topics that we've already seen, things like, you know, machine time and the false divinity of capital. So, okay, I'm going to start giving a little bit of a survey of some of this work that I just alluded to. And the first part of the slide is called coordination, problem, ? So here's a meme. Financial growth, exponential financial growth on a planet with finite resources. And in the bottom right hand corner of the meme is a screenshot from this game Universal Paperclips, which I guess some of you might have played. I'm seeing some chuckles. And so in this game you play a humble paperclip merchant. You get strips of metal and you click a button to turn them into paperclips. Then after a while you start getting tools. You can automate and accelerate this process. And the logical endpoint of this is that you control a squadron of hyperdimensional intelligences which go around the universe stripping all available material to make paperclips. And that's what I see in the forms of market-based capitalism that we live under today. These unseen and unthinking machines are optimizing for objective functions which don't include us, or certainly aren't aligned with us. And so markets seem to kind of rule everything around us. And when we've got markets, when we've got societies and communities, even if we try to design those in an equitable and democratic way, it's very, very hard to avoid either explicit or implicit power structures kind of laid behind or embedded within these. You can see this 3x3, which I stole from Tim Pastor, I think 10 years ago. This is trying to compare the power dynamics of a network, whether that's a literal network of like computation, or it's a social network or a professional network, let's say. How the power is distributed and how the network is organized has a great deal of impact on whether there's control remaining after the dispersal of the agents in the graph. And there's a great book by Alexander Galloway called Protocol. It's probably on these shelves somewhere, maybe. And that's called, the subtitle of that book is How Control Exists After Decentralization. It actually predated a lot of contemporary network technology, the kinds of stuff we're going to talk about now. Oh, it's the Baudrillard checkpoint. Well, I'm sure many people are familiar with the well-worn concepts of simulation and simulacra, and if not, they were put to very extensive use in the Matrix series of movies. But in Baudrillard's later work, in particular Symbolic Exchange and Death, he left behind this kind of like peeling back the layers of the unreal, of the simulacrum, and exchanged it for a much more interesting way of trying to understand how we've ended up at the society, in particular the market-driven aspects of the societies that we have now. So I'm going to read you a little quote. "We now live in a world dominated by the free play of the monetary sign that is beyond reference to any reel of production, or even a monetary referent in the form of a gold standard. In this world, the idea of a real value, of equities, of commodities, of houses, of anything, is meaningless, as what matters instead is not value per se, but infinite speculation. This new world is marked by the emergence of a brothel of capital, not for prostitution, but for substitution and commutation." So what Baudrillard's talking about here is that we've kind of left behind our ideas of raw commodity value, things like sacks of wheat, bags of coal, and we've left even behind now the refined, the labour and social action on those to make things like steel and bread. And instead, all that really has value now are kind of cool codes, semiotics, memes, we could say, and take a look at the world around you if you want some pointers on how that's going. All right, so now I want to talk about time in itself. And this is a quote from the foreword that me and a couple of friends wrote of this very important accelerationist text, Capitalism's Transcendental Time Machine, which came out at the turn of the century. So this is 1999-2000. It was published as a PhD thesis. And in it, Anna Greenspan, who's now a renowned Sino-futurist philosopher at NYU Shanghai, was plotting a line from Kant through like Bergson and Deleuze to try and understand what might be happening, or like a trend that might be emerging in terms of the capture of technology and capital, or the capture of time by technology and capital. So here's a quote. And here I'm trying to equate time, money, and God in a way. "New conceptions of time can only ever be thought of in relation to emerging techno-capitalist apparatuses, which themselves generate time, and it is the distribution, ordering, and arbitration of time that these apparatuses control. Capitalist time is ultimately born of strict equivalence with capital. Time equals money." And the second quote is from an essay I wrote last year called Profit Motives, where I'm trying to equate capital with a kind of a false divinity. Welt and Zauberung via Weber and Schiller anticipates the exfiltration of magic, sorcery, and the occult from the arena of divinity by upstart belief systems. In their place, other cultural rationalizations appear. Has the marketplace of ideology dethroned God, with the demi-urgent efficiencies of precisely measured, regulated and quantized time. In other words, does time equal God? And it's now that I introduce you to a new world. Welcome to the Renaissance. If you haven't heard that word before, that's alright, because it's a new one. It's a bastard neologism containing parts of Greek and Latin roots. So chronos is the Greek term for a linear, precise, metricized time, the time of the clock, the time that passes second by second. And naissance, as in renaissance, the renewal, the new. So what we're talking about here is a new regime of time, a new temporal regime. And I'm going to exemplify that with this weird 2x2 from the Corporate Surrealist Vibe Shift by Reality Spammer. And we've got this kind of axis where we're debating whether things are real or not. And on the left, things are real, on the right, they're not. And on the top, it's money, and on the bottom, it's time. So, good old Hillary Clinton. She thinks that money's real and time's real. She's a corporate realist. Immanuel Kant thinks that money is real but time is not real. He's a corporate quasi-realist. Gilles Deleuze thinks that money is not real but time is real. He's a corporate anti-realist. And the corporate surrealism example is Kanye West, who thinks that money ain't real and time ain't real. And I think the reason that Kanye is our kind of canonical example of a mold breaker here is because he keeps seeming to get into like completely unnecessary scandals, ruining his financial prospects in order to make some kind of grand gesture and comeback. And as a good capitalist subject, we're just supposed to be mindlessly accumulating this stuff. We're not supposed to be throwing it in the bin and setting it on fire. So I suppose that's why Kanye is there. But we can then use this 2x2 to plot the line that Anna Greenspan is making in terms of like this ascendance of a new machine regime of time. So we're going from Kant through Deleuze, powered somewhat by Bergson. I don't want to go too deep into the philosophical moves they're making, but Kant's big transcendental move is to kind of separate an inside or an inner form, an outside or an outer form. And it was Bergson and Deleuze that used this as a framework, but rather than keep this hard distinction between inside and outside, Deleuze through Bergson made this instead a flat plane of intensities. So it's something more subtle than a kind of a grand outside, like the transcendent idea of heaven. It's something much more diffuse and harder for us to grok. And the reason for that is sometimes one can imagine that things happen in time, but not in the time that we're measuring and that we're aware of. And Anna Greenspan's thesis covered a very particular event in time, which is a good example of that. So, but before we get to that, I just want to show you how our conceptions of time, timekeeping, patience, have evolved over the ages. And we're going to use the example of the Christian virtue of temperance, which first appeared in the early Middle Ages. And the first form of temperance was as a femme-coded individual holding 2 jugs of water and passing the water from one to the other. And that's representing, so the linear flow of the liquid from one to the other is measuring the passage of time. This is a water clock. And those were some of the earliest timekeeping devices that humans developed that could keep the time all day. So we had sundials for a very long time, but when there's no sun, there's no sundial. So a mixture of solar and sun and water clocks were probably used together to keep time. Also interesting aside that some of the earliest desires or like forms of formal timekeeping came out of things like monasteries and things like abbeys to regulate the day in terms of the prayers, the duties, eating and so on. So like time and the divine seem entangled. All right, and then later on we start to see temperance with an hourglass, which is another gravitational clock, but now it's with sand. And the nice thing about this kind of timekeeping technology is we can vary the contours of the hourglass or the material, the coarseness of the sand inside it, to vary the flow rate and therefore vary what we're actually measuring. But what I think it's worth saying that these are all kind of relative timekeeping mediums. These are not giving you an absolute time. For that, we would still rely on the sun. The idea that the sun at its highest point in the day, that's noon wherever you are. That's solar noon. Okay, and then later, in the mid 14th century, in Heinrich Susser's The Wisdom of the Clock, there were representations of temperance with mechanical clocks, which was a new emerging technology at that time. So our kind of notions, our ideals, our imaginaries of time are also kind of bound up with the technologies that we use to measure it. And so like now it's now, and we have different kinds of clocks. You can think of, probably know about atomic clocks, probably know about GPS, that thing that we use on our phones. Well, I mean, you might think of that in terms of distances and like giving you location, but if you look at it from the other way around, because the speed of light connects time and space in a pretty reliable way, you could also think of GPS as a network of space clocks, which I think is a pretty cool alternative framing. So the thing on the screen here is a very fast laser apparatus at a national laboratory in the UK. And I used it for my PhD. This was the experimental apparatus I used, where we were doing extremely fast laser experiments in the sub-picosecond domain. So that's 0 with 12 zeros and then a 1. That's, not much happening there apart from the dances of photons and electrons. But those processes are also themselves clocks. And here's a diagram of that clock, I guess you could say. It's called a Jablonski diagram, and the lines going up are us putting energy into the system, and the other squiggles are the kind of ticking of the clock, I guess you could say. All right, so let's return to the everyday now. We've got very abstract. But ultimately, we live in a society, and time seems to regulate or even rule most of what we see around us. So I want to say something about how we regulate time on planet Earth. These technologies shape and are shaped by the production logics of capitalism, the clock, enabling autonomous timekeeping, synchronized industrial production and transport systems, meanwhile acting as both an instrument and a symbol of power and authority. The introduction of global temporal standards such as Greenwich Mean Time, time zones, and network-mediated temporalities all serve to imbue timekeeping practices with greater precision and universality. So there's some great work in the Funambulist magazine. I think I've seen copies around here, looking at alternative temporalities, removing the imperial yoke. So Greenwich Mean Time was imposed by the British Empire at an international conference back when the British Empire was important. And time has been bound up with colonial power, both in terms of the way that one set of people, one set of power structures imposes the temporal logics and the ways of being on another. And so there's some great examples of what the British did in Ireland and in Palestine as well. And, Palestine should still be in our thoughts and minds now in terms of colonialism and resisting that. Where's the biggest clock tower in the world now? Well, there's a clue. It's on the left there. It's the Burj Al Sa'a in Mecca. And some people think that now that Mecca's got the biggest clock, they should have the prime meridian, because that's kind of how it worked when London got it. So you can see that these things are arbitrary, but the symbols of power, these giant phallic clock towers piercing the sky, as symbols of domination, as symbols of force and coercion, should be something that we hold in our minds. Okay, Y2K checkpoint. The reason Y2K is important here is because Anna Greenspan's thesis ended as she wrote it and published it in the year 2000. So her big event was the year 2000. And I think some of you must have been around when that happened. I remember it quite well. and there was a wild panic at scale that essential computing systems were going to break. Planes were going to fall out of the sky, nuclear warheads were going to get launched, and in the end, nothing seemed to happen. Well, what Greenspan proposes is that something did happen, but just not in the realm of Chronos, in the realm of our everyday experience, the time of the clock, rather that something happened in this aeonic plane outside that. And that was a break which heralded the rise of new kinds of cybernetic and machinic forms of time, new kind of machine temporalities. So nothing happened in Y2K, or did it? Within the moment of Y2K, there was present an understanding that the machinery of networks and digital computation facilitates new potentials for universalities and totalities. All of the techno-economic affordances of virtual capital flows are rendered achievable through the proliferation of chronometers for cyberspace in the ascendant since Y2K. Digital timekeeping began at scale in the dawn of the 1970s with the creation of Unix time. Unix time was it's a timestamp. It's this long kind of series of digits, and it started on January the 1st, 1970, and every second it goes up by 1. So this is a kind of a way that we've digitally tried to represent this infinite and that's the wrong slide. This infinite and ineffable nature of time that we experience passing through our hands. But the computer only has a certain amount of memory, so it has to represent things in these kind of reduced ways, and that then means that we can run out of time in these ways. And so the Unix time will actually run out of address space in 2038. So that's only 14 years away. So some people are already panicking about that. Well, I guess we'll see what happens. And just a small side note that the cryptocurrency Bitcoin also uses Unix timestamps in a way, but the way it uses it, its clock won't run out until 2106. And that's why in the performance of the Immaculate Misconception, which we're going to do in a moment, that ends in 2106 with the Bitcoiners frantically trying to fix the clock of Bitcoin. Okay, these visuals didn't work, so I want to now segue onto kind of the why, or like why it matters. So we talked about this idea of having machine clocks. We talked very vaguely about things like Bitcoin having a decentralized way of timekeeping, and through the mining, it can it's a messy and it's an inexact clock, but it ticks without the logics of the sun and the moon and the stars. So it's divorced now from the solar, from the lunar, from the calendric. So here's a poetic refrain. The church and the network, zeal and time, death and money, all sides of the same coin. So the thing with Bitcoin is that every 2 weeks, as you're doubtless aware of this thing, Bitcoin mining, which uses all this energy in order to decide what happens next. So every 2 weeks, the system adjusts how likely it is for one of these miners to hit the jackpot and find one of these Bitcoin blocks. But by doing that, it removes any kind of possibility of satiety of Bitcoin. So the network will never have enough energy. It will always want more. The other thing is that it doesn't know about the externalities or the harms it causes to the environment. It doesn't care, cannot care, just cares about getting what it needs, this energy. So it's the highest maintenance clock in the universe. Okay, and we have some measurements of how hungry the clock of Bitcoin is. These are measurements of the hash rate, which is an indirect measure of the computational resource going to defend the network. And this thing is just going up, goes up even faster than the price of Bitcoin, actually. And so the climate impact of Bitcoin is now reaching things like gold mining. You know, when we dig holes in the ground and pump them full of toxic chemicals to get the shiny rocks out, we're now as bad as that. So all that's really left for Bitcoin is to take on beef, cattle farming. So what's interesting about Bitcoin, as well as the way the network functions, is that the social and cultural aspects of the people around this thing. So remember that Bitcoin is this very horizontalized space. There's no leaders, there's no rulers, there's just this protocol and there's this mining thing. The founder seems to have disappeared 15 years ago, and like they look like they're gone. So this thing really seems like kind of anarchic. You know, it could be a utopia, it could be a dystopia, but it seems quite anarchic. Around Bitcoin, like, you know, the thought leaders around Bitcoin, or the people that people listen to in the communities listen to, are mostly quite right-wing. There's this kind of techno-libertarian streak going through the adherents of the network, and they even say things like the tweet on the right, which is, if we burned more coal, we could green the planet more because trees like coal. So that's the logic, the kinds of logic that we're dealing with here. And I think a lot of the kind of unfortunate aspects of the Bitcoin culture can be helpfully rationalized by this concept of petro-masculinity. I'm going to read you a little quote from Kara Daggett's paper. As the planet warms, new authoritarian movements in the West are embracing a toxic combination of climate denial, racism, and misogyny. Petro-masculinity appreciates the historical role of fossil fuel systems in buttressing patriarchal rule, as anxieties aroused by the Anthropocene augment desires for authoritarianism. Petro-masculinity suggests that fossil fuels mean more than profit. They contribute to making identities. Through a psychopolitical reading of authoritarianism, fossil fuel use can function as a violent reactionary practice. And I actually have so many examples of this that it's not funny, but I'm going to show you just one. And this guy is actually one of the most famous people in Bitcoin now. He says he mined with Satoshi 15 years ago, and he threw his hard drive in the bin, and he's been trying to get it back ever since. It's been, I think, 10 years now. No. Yes, 11 years. He's been trying. So this guy's had so much press, it's crazy. And he's now suing the government of a small poor town in Wales in the UK because they won't let him dig up the rubbish dump to maybe find his hard disk and maybe get his Bitcoins back. So these people don't really care about anything except Bitcoin. I want to then just show you some of the, like, to set up for what's going to come in the second half, talk about some of the projects we've done on this topic of the externalities of Bitcoin. So we made a theatre production in 2022 called The Black Hole of Money. And this was part of a European Commission funded project, which was about combining science, technology and arts in the context of the fragile ecological present. And so what we were doing with this project was putting our critiques of Bitcoin into kind of creative, satirical and performative practice, but we created this kind of absurd Shakespearean, pseudo-Shakespearean context where the planet is falling apart, but the Bitcoiners don't care, and the government can't seem to stop it. And yeah, so it's kind of a, you know, a wry look at some possible futures which we might exist in. And the other side of that project, just ignore that thing, it's not on exhibition there anymore, but you're going to see it in a minute. The other project we did as part of this program is called the Immaculate Misconception, which turned the work that we did in exploring these possible futures mediated by Bitcoin into an interactive choose your own misadventure game that we made through the platform Twine. So that's what we're gonna go through in a minute. I think I've got a few minutes left, so I'm going to introduce you to your new friend Hashi. So many of you probably remember the annoying Microsoft Office paperclip, Clippy. Well, what about an anthropomorphized Bitcoin mining machine called Hashi? Well, it's the main character in both the play and the game that we made. So the reason you haven't heard about Hashi is because it's from the future. It's a virtual influencer from the late 2020s that was created by the cartel that controls the Bitcoin mining on Earth. And it exists, like, I think, like a lot of things exist in this part of the world, in a kind of cutesy way to try and kind of distract you from the realities of this capitalist mode of production that is kind of swallowing everything. So the idea is that Hashi helps to kind of rehabilitate the public image of Bitcoin through its cuteness and through its kind of wacky hijinks. There may be a TV show coming in the future. Watch out for that. Okay, so I want to just wrap by talking a bit more about the work I'm doing more recently, which I think is also very much connected to this Bitcoin stuff. So Bitcoin exists in the metaphysical, in cyberspace or cypherspace. But a lot of the people that got rich from things like Bitcoin now want to make their own territories at home here on the surface of planet Earth. And so, as I said, there's a lack of leaders in Bitcoin. And so that means that anyone can walk in, put on a crown of thorns or a suit and say that they're in charge. And many people have done this. And so I want to show you, we now have nation states that are advocating for Bitcoin. This is El Salvador's strongman, Nayib Bukele, who wants to build a Bitcoin city. We now have projects that want to build a free, or let's say, take the concept of special economic zones and charter cities to the next level to build like completely privatized territories. And we've got examples of things like Aleph, Praxis, Urbit, and then also Prospera. And so one of the things that's coming out of the crypto space now, and it could be argued that this is because of the failure of the previous sets of dreams, such as Web3, is this idea of the network state. The idea that highly aligned individuals can crowdfund to acquire physical territory and then basically set up, garner legitimacy to try and create the organizational successors to the nation state. So these people want to destabilize the nation state context and become the kings or the emperors of their new whatevers. So I want to talk to you about this concept of the, excuse me, I have to move around a bit. So the concept of the network state is just really succinctly encapsulated by this statement from Balaji Srinivasan's book, which is where this concept comes from. A network state is a social network with the moral innovation, a sense of national consciousness, a recognized founder, a capacity for collective action, an in-person level of civility, an integrated cryptocurrency, a consensual government limited by a social smart contract, an archipelago of crowd-funded physical territories, a virtual capital, and an on-chain census that proves a large enough population, income, and real estate footprint to attain a measure of diplomatic recognition. And the key words in here, from what I can see, are the recognized founder, because then this makes the CEO, elevates the CEO to the level of the emperor, let's say. The physical territories, because then that means, well, I mean, if we're going to build something on physical territories, that we're excluding the people that either are already there or other people that might want to be there. And the diplomatic recognition, because that's driving at what the end game is in this network state idea. The idea is to set up new empires, new kingdoms, new colonialisms, new imperialisms. So I've been doing research on this. I've been connecting it to the holy wars of the Middle Ages, which were called the Crusades. And it's funny because I do this research in the West where this all happened. Nobody knows anything about this. We do not teach kids in school about this at all. Nobody knows. And I imagine people know even less about it here because it has nothing to do with this place. But some really messed up stuff happened in the Middle Ages in the place where Christianity, Islam, and Judaism share their origins. And a bunch of Western imperialists conquered some of those lands under the kind of direction of the Pope and made these Crusader kingdoms. They made institutions like the Knights Templar, the Knights Hospitaller, the Knights of Malta and Rhodes, which you might have heard of, and also these four kingdoms that you can see in the map here on the eastern shores of the Mediterranean. And the book that I'm writing now is called The Chainmail Gaze, which takes this as the start point and the present day, runs all the way through to the present day of this timeline of 1,000 years of Western imperialism as driven by capital and technology. And I'm not going to, spell it out, but the four kingdoms that the Crusaders made on the screen behind me bear more than a passing resemblance to a certain rogue nation that is occupying the eastern banks of the Mediterranean today. And that's what the book will be about, this idea of the chainmail gaze. But I'll stop there in the interest of time. Thank you. Nice. Okay, so welcome back. So the second half of the event, I guess, is going to put into practice in a creative and a kind of comedic way some of the concepts and theories that we unpacked in the first part. So as I think I mentioned, in 2022, the 0xSalon was awarded residency as part of the European Commission's STARTS programme under the Repairing the Present call. The idea was to use technology and science for new kinds of sense-making in the ecological present through the lens of art. And what we proposed there, having done all this work already on Bitcoin as the clock and as this kind of insatiable monster of energy, we decided that we would, excuse me, put that into practice in a few different ways. So we'd already made a radio play, unscripted radio play about technology governance, kind of in the style of British satire. And we'd already prototyped the card game, which we talked about the other time, that's still on the desk. So what we proposed was that then we would then take both of these strands further. We would make a theatre production, which we acted out one night in the... So the residency was in Copenhagen. They gave us a theatre an hour away in a town called Helsingør, and we did our project in the former shipbuilding yard turned into a theatre next door to where Hamlet lived. Hamlet's castle was there in Helsingør. And that's very funny for us because we stole quite a lot from Shakespeare. So we got this kind of like poetic punishment for that. And so that was the theatre production, which is actually very hard to produce, as you can imagine. Many moving parts there. But we also made a more stripped down virtual reconfiguration of that material, which is the game that we're going to go through now. So the idea is that we mapped out as a team of writers. That was, well, I'll go through the credits in a minute. We mapped out 4 possible timelines over 100 years, for like 80 years from the present into the early 22nd century. And they're mediated by the strategies that humans use to try and coordinate against this kind of this new technological leviathan that is Bitcoin and its rapacious desire for resources and energy. And so we are going to be like you. This is like interactive. So you're going to be making the decisions, and then we're going to be playing that out and see what happens in our, in this new world. And so I just want to give you the, because this was a big group project, so I want to give you the description and also the credits. The Immaculate Misconception is an interactive storytelling environment inspired by pre-internet game books. Participants make a series of policy decisions over time as Bitcoin proliferates and global sea levels rise. Acceleration of the quest for limitless energy, attempts to exile Bitcoin off-planet, conducting an insurrection, or acquiescence to the new machine god. The game interrogates the environmental implications of cryptocurrencies by charting speculative futures that probe the tensions between capital and ecology in the contemporary global regime dominated by scarcity economics. The work unfolds as a fictional narrative where formerly failed states make Bitcoin their official currency, as volcano-powered energy makes them the richest nations on Earth, and eco-conscious activists start rising up against mining farms. And so here's the team. Almost all of the game, in terms of the software mechanics and the design, was done by Anna Louise Lorenz. She did a phenomenal amount of work on this. The text of the world and the stories were written by a team of 4, and that was myself, Habib William Kerbeck, Claire Tolan and Catherine Tyndall. Hashi, who you met a minute ago and you're going to see again, was animated by Bethon Undal, and I made the music. So, and just last to say, we got a nice little bit of press for this. This is in the Italian newspaper Il Messaggero, and I don't think they understood what we were doing, but it was nice to get the acknowledgement. Alright, enough of that. I think I can go here. Yes, okay, wonderful. So, one moment. I hope my voice is up to this. I'm struggling a bit. Let's see. Well, hello there. I'm your new friend, the Runestone Cowboy, and I'm here to guide you through a weird and wild adventure through our possible futures, dominated and denominated by the new unstoppable force of techno-capital that we call Coiny B. Alright. Tick, tock, tick, tock, tick, tock. Tempus fugit, armor mounted, so the saying almost goes. Time is all around us, watching our lives and clocking our hours as we grind to dust under insatiable formations of capital. Who built all the clocks?
Hello everybody, I'm Hashi. Let's get to know each other. I'm from Shenzhen, China, and I love to hash. Proof of work is my game, and it makes the planet a better place. Isn't that what we all want? What kind of world would we be living in without old Coiny B? I don't even want to think about it. It would be so cold. I hate the new ice age. We have to warm the planet up to avoid the big freeze. Always remember, there was once a subtropical climate at the poles. Greta was a mistake. We must return to meteorological tradition. Don't call it a hothouse Earth. Call it a cozy planet.
Good morning to you, friend. Or as they say around here, GM. May I ask, what is your name, fellow time traveler? You out there, you have to choose your name. So what is it? What do you got? Nothing. Silence. Is that you? Huh? Giles. Or is that Gilet? Davis. Giles Davis. I think I remember seeing a concert or two back in the Old West. It's good to make your acquaintance, fellow Giles Davis. Take your pupe here. You must have traveled long to reach us in the here and now. What year is it, anyway? You know, you can't trust everyone you meet out here. In the Wild West Web3 casino, there be coyotes, bandits, and dissimulations amongst the denizens of the cyber realm. So, let's get to know each other, friend. It always helps to know what kind of company you're riding the timeline with. Beautiful, shiny Bitcoin. Behold in all its glory. Tell me, dear Giles Davis, do you like the coin? Okay, raise your hands mightily. Much. Maybe. Meh. I think we're maybe. The coin has many faces and many lives. Look into its circuits. Do you want to look deeper? How much do you want to or dare to know? Everything? The good bits? The problematic bits? We'll check after I finish on TikTok. People want everything. They want everything. Coins are all about change, even the non-physical ones. It's time for a heads or tails question. In a world of entropy, you only have so much energy to be useful with. For you, which is the wisest spend? Change the world? Change yourself? Okay, self. Every revolution starts in the mind. Shrewd choice. So you're working on yourself. Admirable. But the question remains, What hot truths will you stash in your dark wallet? I'm on the grid, but not off the grid. If it's up to me, if it's to be, it's up to me and Coiny B. Don't worry if it doesn't make sense. Doesn't matter. And this is our special machine here, trying to work out what kind of personality y'all have got. This is Giles Davis. You are a member of the public. Fine body. Dear Giles Davis, thank you for taking part in our little survey. We've collected your answers and measured them in relation to our scientific taxonomy of coiner archetypes. Miners, investors, activists, and the general public. According to our metrics, your replies suggest you're closer to being the general public than our other options. But of course, there's a little of each and everybody. Let's see how we see you. No, friend, doesn't mean that you have to join the socialist army. Just means you're kind of a solid citizen. You may not pay that close of attention to the news. You may not trust the powers that be. You may just kind of like taking life as it comes to you, and so not that much comes to you. But a fair bit of skepticism will serve you well among the coiners. Just make sure you don't get too cynical. You never know when a real opportunity might come your way. In the beginning, before the Genesis, in the formless block voids, unbound by chains, was Koi, a formal divinity of indifference and repetition, manifests reality. Cryptography creates theologic gates. Business School Dropout 2023. I hope you've been studying, because we're back at school again. In which the esteemed Professor Hubristics of the Byzantine Business School attempts to convince Federal Reserve regulators to adopt Bitcoin as a reserve currency. He knows what he's talking about, or at least he thinks he does. And confidence is the most important currency of all. It's not that it's going to solve all our problems, though to be fair, solving problems is what makes Bitcoin go around. It's more that the coin has certain properties. It offers certain certainties that you can't get elsewhere. Also, it provides clarity of consensus, a problem with which you might be familiar. I see the upsides. I just see the downsides too. I mean, we already have a perfectly good currency. I would contend it's an imperfectly good currency. Ultimately, it's up to you. But the mining is going to go on anyway. If not in America, then somewhere else. El Salvador, Sweden, China. They're not so bullish on alternative systems in Beijing these days. Maybe you might want to have a chat with someone in the International Relations Department sometime, Professor. Now, I think we shouldn't be overly hasty. A market is a market. Certainty is a beautiful thing, Professor. But I wonder if the world can afford this much certainty. I mean, we're not on track for 1.5 degrees. And as you know, the coin is hungry. All the more reason to get involved now. If the Treasury steps in, we can make the coin greener, leaner, cleaner, give it a whole new demeanor. Send us a prospectus. We may even read it. I just want to hear it, that's all. Sooner or later, Professor, I'm sure you'll have one of those. He's made his case. What do you think? Courses are open at the Byzantine Business School now. A. Enroll in the Byzantine Business School immediately and take control of your future today. B. Don't enroll. Let the market decide. C. Real education is knowing what to do with other people's debt. Okay, we got a B. We're not going to school. You chose B. It's a long way to Tipperary and to long-term solvency. Rough start, Pierre Giles Davis. But hold on, there's more to come. And it's never easy to be the new kid on the block. You've got another chance to make up for lost time chains right now. The Hanging Gardens. Hey Vashti, did I just hear the washing machine stop? Yeah, Worm. The microgrid is tapped out. Probably the neighbors gaming again. One of these days, I'm just going to pull the plug. Totally unnecessary energy usage. I don't see why you would join a solar punk van community if you're just gonna sit around wallowing in Wi-Fi radiation all day. Did you hear they're hooking up a mesh net? On the vertical garden? What for? Oh, my accent's moving around terribly. I'm sorry. I should take my hat off when I'm not the cowboy. Makes it easier for me. What for? If it's nylon, it'll just shed microplastics in the water system all day. No, babe. It's some kind of internet thing. Told me it's a radical alternative to big telecom. The master's tools will never unplug the master's router. The banksters want to turn the San Salvador volcano into a Bitcoin mine. A millennia-old natural marvel converted into a playground for incels. The gamer to miner pipeline. That's the one we should be sabotaging. Never doubt that a small group of reckless, committed vandals can change the world. Nothing else ever has. Ours shall be the righteous hands that forge chips into plowshares. Ooh, or into funky upcycled earrings. We're not so different, really. I have my mining pool, you, your cuddle puddles. We're fighting the same enemy, the conventional currency class. Think what we could accomplish together if we joined forces. A great civilization, decentralized and autonomous, harvesting the free energy of the sun. Sabotage or mirage? Do you want to see Worm and Vashti go through with it? Can they drain the memory swamps and give the miners the shaft? Only one way to find out, right? Who wants to attack? Okay. Or maybe it's better to select your battles carefully. As any crust punk will tell you, sometimes doing nothing is the most revolutionary act of all. Who wants to wait? But there are other possible forks in Schrodinger's draw. Our dank heroes sure do have an appetite for risk. But every good investor knows there's a difference between risk and uncertainty. Maybe the miners aren't ready for an unannounced peer review. But can you really put your faith in organized anarchists? And that's just the short term. If they win today, does that mean they'll win tomorrow? If you'd like to play the long game, we've got a proposition you might just like. Okay, we actually have 4 options here. It's quite confusing. Attack. Wait. Short the coin. Buy the dip. I think we're attacking. Looks like we're attacking. All right, nice. Let's do it. Filthy barefoot noi-coiners. You think this is enough to bring us down? You have no idea what you're dealing with in sheer server numbers alone. Cut off 1 mine and we'll make 3 more secure, all more powerful than the ones which came before. We will dig in so deep, you will never be able to uproot us. And then we'll come for you in your pathetic co-ops, your filthy van camps. Dig! Looks like Worm and Vashti managed to make it rain. Nothing can say these hippies don't wash. I'm sure they'll celebrate him with the crunchiest of granola and the muskiest kombucha money can't buy tonight. But sometimes a minor threat can turn into a major kerfuffle. Let's see how you fared. Now for something completely different and unprotected by copyright. We're going to turn things over to Josie Public Key, the best loved voice in MMORPGery, to bring you a little light entertainment from the world of competitive influencing. It's handsets at dawn as 2 of the squeakiest influencers in the galaxy face off in an energy speculation rap war. I hope you're in a betting mood, because this time the stakes could not be higher. Yucky activists.
Consider now a new social network, like TikTok, but somehow it's even worse. It's Yik Yak, and there the creators vie to best all the other energy tribes. For in this weird future of exit, not voice, you move to be served by the source of your choice. Some to where nuclear power splits ions, some to a near orbit solar Zion, and some to track charter states that still frack. So, into this geopolitical trap, stage left, enter the most loved creators, Yik Yak. 1 from reactors of breeder nuclear, 2 from solar panels and earth herbiteers. They deplane hype loop and non-stop live stream into the land in which we convene, where frackers do scoff at energies clean. Here our Yik Yaks a rap battle shall stage, in balloons stratospheric so high to engage a view of their adjoined jurisdictions. But what follows some might call horror in fiction.
Clap Brady's Petty High, pre clapping the balloon, now clapping colluminates, CCM that's balloon, Omi, Ohio, Kumbuski Terra, boo, Fracky Kluskis, boo, anybody words foolish 2 minutes on the sun, boom, clacks to Sagmi class here.
Don't worry if you're not following along closely. It's fine. Skunning is the word. I'm sure you'll agree. So who looks more like the future? Solar or nuclear? The choice is yours. Or you can get meta the old-fashioned way, choose not to choose and just sit back and watch the fun. Solar. Nuclear. Nukes. Pass. nukes. Tough crowd. Yik-yaks is stunned, yik-yaks behold the sprawl of the earth and its manifold. Rivers, lakes, and forests once green, becoming desert in a grotesquest of scenes. They see three fair cities triangulated, where different energies are accelerated. Nuclear reactors of breedies they steam, and rockets of sollies with new panels gleam. Directly below the pumps of combuskies, frack and pipe gas to old craft works rusty. At 10-gun salute, the yik-yaks breathe deep, preparing to drop the basest of beats. But from the sky above comes an ominous moan, the fast approach of a Vanta-black drone. Closer and closer to yik-yak balloon. With innocent glee, our yik-yackers stare as tiny black specks rise into the air. The fiercely trained raptures of combusties soar in to destroy the adversary. A shared triumph for our yik-yaks would be destruction of despised paparazzi. But drone is not the paps. Drone is much worse. It flies past balloon, then hits sharp reverse, and wings straight into balloon's graceful little dome, exploding to send our creators home to Earth, where sadly the stars most beloved of yik-yak smash into desertified mud. Off stage left, the Clathrate Liberation Force ululate until their voices are hoarse. Okay, you have three options here. Terrible, terrible, terrible. Terrible, terrible, terrible. Terrible, terrible, terrible. Okay, right. Subtle differences. What two young idealistic crusties started in resistance to the almighty coin has become a wanton battle of all against all. Who would have thought that a simple digital token infused by Who would have thought that a simple digital token infused with libertarian ideology and the unimpeachable logic of multi-level marketing could result in such horror? I don't blame you if you cry, friend, but don't give up. There's really no point in crying over a little spilt uranium-235. Life goes on. And as Ayn Rand herself would put it, we the living need to make a living. Sometimes a little ETF therapy can help with the grief. The hammer and the scorecard. Hello! We've already seen a lot of ups and downs in our little adventure, but if you found yourself here, you can already consider yourselves a winner. But any fool can make money. The real winners know how to spend it. Why do you take a little gander at the luxury offerings available now that you've reached the outer orbits of the winner's circle?
Famine, fire, war, collapse. In today's world, no one is safe. Imagine a place as safe as your Bitcoin wallet. Cube, a physical space secured by technology where only a trusted few can enter. A smart paradise where state-of-the-art algorithms cater to your every desire. And to enter the key to your wallet is also your key to the world's safest gated community. Our 20 cubic hectare facility provides everything you need, surrounded by 4 solid meters. Each Cube subscriber receives a secure, luxury flat with a perfect view of endless sunny sky. Included with each subscription is a complete meal, gym.
What do you think? Are you going to get in on the ground floor? Or is the cube a little bit too square for your tastes? Yes, even though this event was free entry, I'm afraid there's a small amount of paid programming for this timeshare presentation at this point. Subscribe. Hard angles suit me. Pass. I'm really a 5-dimensional personality. Okay, we're passing. Fine choice. Fine choice. Ghost miners in the sky. Fellow Giles Davis, it's hard to tame a wild creature, and Bitcoin is as wild as they come. I know learning helps, but theory and praxis don't always join up in the best ways. You've tried markets, you've tried institutions, and you've tried markets again, and it's all come up short. You might have already heard rumblings, but there's been a revolution afoot in preceding decades. The coin cult split into different denominations. Some went along with the Byzantine beliefs. A more regulated coin is a freer, friendlier creature. But some didn't. They doubled down, then they tripled down, then they Googled down. And things have not been pretty since. They call them the lame coiners. You'd expect as much given the message boards the true believers read. But they have a Bitcoin too, only they got pushed off planet and are stuck mining on the moon. But the coin is hungry, and you know regulators better than anyone. They fought to a draw, the Bitleavers and the lame coiners, but they didn't run out of energy. Now though, things might be different, and the moon coiners, lunatics as some style them, have decided there's only one way to stop Bitcoin and its acolytes: the regulation of the grave. The moon crew is led by a charismatic cowpoke. Maybe he gets a little wound up at times, but sometimes he sees it clearly. He's got a proposal to his people and to any regulator who still believe the coin can be tamed. Okay, I'm now a different cowboy, but this cowboy has the same accent, and the same hat, coincidentally. Coiners, I've come to you today to ask just about everything of you. We've stood together. We've watched as the evil coin has made our lives unlivable. They've blocked our gas stations. They've threatened our minds, and they've lied about it. It's clear to me today, clear as liquid crystal, that they'll never tell us the truth. They'll always be fighting us. In the chain, in the sky, along the vents, wherever there's heat or light or freedom, the evil coin will come for you. Well, coiners, they had a saying where I came from. In fact, I said it myself. Y'all know me as a warrior. I've been at it for centuries. I've been at war all my life and all my lives. I was Alexander, building a mold to reach time, listening to those toga-wearing lips laugh at me the whole time. Well, they found out. I was a warrior when I pushed into Gaul, took out that goddamn goofy Vercingetorix out, then took all of Rome the same way. I was a warrior when I was fighting for Napoleon in Leipzig. They called it the Battle of Nations. Well, nations come and go, but battles are forever. I was a warrior in what they used to call Mexico when they called me Zapata. The odds were against me, my people, then, just as they're against us now. But I told my people, as I'm telling you, it's not a question of if we're gonna die, it's a question of how we're gonna die. Are we gonna die on our feet, or are we gonna die on our knees? I fought with the bravest of the brave, whether we were driving the enemy back at Austerlitz, or fighting them on the plains in Smolensk. The brave ones never died but once. That was another one of mine. A
coward coiner dances 1,000 times an hour. Today, I'm asking you to join with me to target the center of the evil coin. We're gonna take their minds and make them ours, and not for a day, but forever. They're gonna remember this day forever, the day we fought back. Now I hear a lot about the climate down there on Earth. They say it's totally unpredictable now. I'd like to know when it wasn't. I remember when we put that damn Spanish Armada at the bottom of the English Channel. Weather wasn't too reliable that day, if my memory serves. But there's one weather condition I know you coiners have heard about. Happened in the War of the Pacific. I was serving in Europe back then, pushing old Adolf down into his last bunker with my pearl-handled revolver on his one nut. But I heard tell of some mean weather out there in Japan. Maybe you know the word. Over there, they call it the divine wind. You might know it better by the word kamikaze. Divine wind? Kamikaze? Alright, kamikaze. You know what they did. What they taught them Arab boys in New York and Pennsylvania, in Iraq and all over the place back when they called me Petraeus. They had a saying back then that I was actually an Arab myself, coming into Spain, teach them a little lesson there. Them Spanish. They ain't never learned. But I said to them, when they were still trying to see sense, I said, I'm coming to you. I'm coming to you with an army that loves death as much as you love life. Well, corners, I'm not asking you to love death today, but I hope you can understand what I was getting at. You can stop a man who has hope, but you can't stop a man who doesn't. They took away our hope, corners, but they also took away our fear. Can you hear it, corners? Can you hear it, Mr. Bitcoin? That sound, it's an answer. It's our answer. And the answer, my friend, is blowing in the divine wind. Corners unite! Oh, I'm back to the previous cowboy now. So what do you think? Are you going to back the insurgency? Is the last law left the first law that gets broken? The laws of war? Fund revolution. Peace at any price. Okay, we're funding the revolution. Dungeons and Devs. The time machine is ticking down. Welcome to 2106. Things have changed a little bit since our last scene. The battle between those who love the coin and those who hate it has heated up. Instead of hot air balloons, the anti-coin insurgents have got bigger targets now. The core citadel of Bitcoin's senior developers. The devs are in crisis, and they need to decide who they can and can't trust. Ironic that it's turned out this way, but irony futures are always a good investment in the land of the coin. Consensus has failed again. Who has defected? Who threatens the faith?
It is I who voted no, and for good reason.
Did you not think I saw the line you snuck in? The one which would have given your own guild preferential access to the new blocks. Do you take us for fools? I wrote no such line. What nonsense is this?
Here it is, lines 1067 to 1156, clear as day. The first tries to sabotage us under the pretense of haste. Blasphemy! You know very well that this fork must succeed today, fool. That is no pretense. 100 years of holy history will crumble into ruin if consensus is not reached by the time the clock strikes midnight. And I had nothing to do with those lines. I would never besmirch the code. But the edits came from your terminal. It's sabotage, clearly. One of you has rerouted edits to my terminal to undermine the fork. One among us is an imposter. Which is it? Very sus of you, trying to store consensus from the inside. I call a vote of no confidence in the prime demi-dev.
I second.
The suspense is killing me, and it might just kill them too. What do you think, Giles Davis? Do you trust the prime dev? Or is he playing with a loaded coin? It's time to make another choice. If you trust the prime, you'll want to bet the farm on the vote of no confidence failing. If you think all devs are bluffers, you might be wiser to keep it trustless. Fail. Pass. Okay, pass. Vote of no confidence passed. 7-6. Brothers, bros, what is the meaning of this? After decades of faithful service to our coin.
I'll hear no more from you. You are no longer prime demi-dev. Leave this place.
But
we did it. We stopped them.
all those decades of planning, of hard work, finally, the blasted coin will be banished from this earth. And so there our story ends, friends. In every transaction, there are winners and there are losers. Sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down, and sometimes you're both at the same time. Just depends on your liquidity preference. I hope you enjoyed your glimpse into the futures to come, and you've had at least a little think about where we're going and how soon we're all going to get there. I have to leave you now. The market is unstable, and my Lambo chariot awaits. But the good news is, you can always come back to where you started to see how things might be different if you tried another pathway. Hindsight, it's the ultimate luxury purchase. If you've got the inclination, I'll see you again. But if not, good luck out there. The path forks in funny ways sometimes. I hope we've given you at least a decent roadmap, though if not enough to get you home, then at least enough for you to avoid the worst. Until next time, Giles Davis, may your chicken always be tender and may the coin shine on you. Adios! Okay, that's it. We lost. The game mostly involves different modes of failure. Like there isn't really a way to win. So that's kind of the point. Unless you join Bitcoin. And then you're on the winning side, I guess. How are we doing for time, Tan? Okay, so maybe we have time. If people want to ask questions, we can do kind of like Q&A if people have. You might have questions after that, maybe. We can also just talk informally at the end, so as you wish. Yeah. All right, then let's wrap it here. Yeah, thanks very much for coming, everybody. It was a real pleasure to be here. Thanks, Tan. Thanks, Candida. Thanks to everyone at CityCITY Gallery for hosting us. It was super fun. Thank you so much. The game's actually a bit fragile. So we used a platform called Twine, which is designed for these kind of branching, forking path stories. But because of we went quite far with Twine in terms of adding like different like OpenGL elements and so on, so it doesn't work that great on like a wide variety of machines. Very often we run it locally using like a VS Code server. So actually the game is not publicly available online. But if somebody's interested in going through it, you can send us a message, and we can send you can give you a way to play through it. And it still goes on exhibition every now and again. I was in a virtual show as part of the Haus der Elektronisches Kunst, the HEK in Basel, last year, and I think we'll do something again with it soon. I quite like this performance mode, which I just showed you. It works much better if we've got a cast. As you can imagine, there's a few different characters, and like my voice is, only capable of doing, I should work on my accents really. But yeah, so normally we do it as like a group of 3 or 4 people. And for the 4th birthday of the salon last winter, we did in the Panke Gallery, it's post-internet gallery and art space in Berlin, with a cast of 4 or 5 of us doing all these different stories. The funny thing is, based on the choices you make in the game, it does really lead you through different paths of the scenes. So actually we failed. But until the end, we could have succeeded. But we took actually quite an unusual path through the game. And that's what makes it kind of interesting for us, but also harder to plan as a performance. Because you don't know which scenes come when. Because it's all kind of dependent on your choices and also somehow dependent on chance. But yeah. That's the... Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, both this interactive game and this card game are kind of like worlds made up of fragments of other worlds. So, for example, we had all this scene with the professors early in the game, and that takes place in a fictional institution called the Byzantine Business School. And there's a Byzantine Business School card somewhere here. So it's a thing that already existed in our imaginations. We already had like a kind of a satirical project based on that concept from 5 years ago. And so we have this kind of constellation of different fragments of these different worlds from all these different projects. And we very often kind of remanufacture or fuse them together. So you very often see like a lot of the characters from this computer game are also in this card game, for example. So the characters, it's like a cinematic universe, I guess is what they call it now. So there's a bit of that going on. You mean the terminology? I think, like when we made this, we thought we wanted to go as far as we could in terms of how oblique and how nuanced the concepts were. But what we realized was, because I was working in a group with 10 to 15 artists, designers, coders that didn't have backgrounds in these topics, we quickly realized that there'd be a legibility issue there. So even after several rounds of pruning it back and trying to keep it kind of on the straight and narrow, I would say that, like, well, what do you guys think? Did you follow all of that? I guess probably not. Probably not. Yeah. Yeah, but it's kind of the point as well. Like, so the machine doesn't care if you understand it. The machine doesn't render itself legible to you. It's not for you in a way. Yeah. But yeah, no, it's still laced with, like, both in terms of the lore of our organization, the story of that, but then also the kind of the stories and the myths that come with these machine cultures as well. So there's many layers actually in there. I mean, I actually try not to come with moral arguments or like, you know, normative declarations anymore, because I kind of had a phase of that where I had strong beliefs about how we could use certain technologies to change and remake society, and now I have less strong beliefs about that. So what I see in the worlds that we're exploring, let's say, for example, in the computer game with Bitcoin in particular, I see a series of like social and cultural manifestations that I got at in the talk earlier, that seem to be like a shadow or like a, you know, templated from the technical architecture and from the cogs of the machine as it's constituted. And so for me, what's interesting in this world is that the technology seems to have come first and the culture has developed kind of ad hoc around it. I was going to say naturally, but actually naturally is a very bad word to use in this context, I think. But yes, it's interesting that the technology came first and then this culture kind of arrived or arose. I'd say that my work kind of goes between, some of it is like, I think, earnest scholarly work. Some of it is pretty harsh critique. And some of it is this kind of like askew, satirical look on things. What I like about the lens of art in general, when approaching theoretical and technological topics, is you can kind of gesture at or say things using the artistic tool set that you can't really say, you know, me holding a mic, sitting here on camera saying X, Y, and Z. But in you know, using these kind of like creative abstractions and these like other kind of rhetorical tools that we can build into discursive art projects like these two, we can kind of go further than we can go with our own identities in discourse by gesturing at what we think is lying at the heart of some of these movements or some of these things that are emerging now. And also, these things are happening now. Like, so nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody knows what these things will actually, how the story will end or how the story will develop. So we can use art as a suite of technologies to help us speculate on those possible futures, on the manifestations. And that's very much what this computer game was doing, where we built these multiple timelines, literally 100 years, like we had these spreadsheets going 100 years into the future, about all the different things that would happen on the planet as the ecology breaks down, as nation-state system breaks down, politics breaks down, war happens, climate refugees, and then try to piece that together into these scenes, of which you've seen some of them, which are spread both across time, but also across the different universes, or the different parallel worlds that are mediated by the choices that you guys made, and what that, and how Bitcoin prospers or fails in respect to that. Yes? Ancient.
And I think it's funny because, I mean, I only saw the end of your presentation, but it seems like you're painting this picture of this kind of world where like crypto culture has really become like a way of living, and I feel actually in the last 2 years, this is something that's become more and more of a thing. I don't know, there are like all these like co-living things now where you can like, yeah, like I've done really on my side right now,
Yep.
where you can live with all the crypto people together on one island, and like, I'm curious to hear your opinion on that.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I did get at this in the talk, but I didn't. It wasn't the central topic in the talk. But I'm interested in how technologies provide the possibilities of exit, and what I see in these pop-up communities, like these pop-up cities, like Zoo Thailand and Edge Lana and things like this, are the chance to kind of disengage with the wider public sphere, the public square, and try to find kind of intimacy or a sense of communion in these new kinds of place that are being made. And I think that sounds great. That bit sounds great. But there's also, I'd say, like a darker tinge to that vision where, let's say, people informed by neo-reactionary thought or people like with right-wing tendencies will try to make much more harder and more nihilistic exits And I did talk about this in relation to the network state and the Balaji Srinivasan concept of exit. And that's why I put up the Crusades related stuff, because I see that project as not being very far away from the medieval Christo-fascist project. And so like there is a very wide spectrum from like cutesy pop-up village to crusade. But I think there's a line going through that. So what is yet to be determined is whether this is a slippery slope, whether people get onboarded through the cutesy unicorn stuff and they end up wielding swords in battle. I don't know. I hope not. But who knows?
What about that relation between artists and crypto? I was thinking that many of your friends were disillusioned constantly. Governments fail, NFT failed, whatever early crypto failed, now something else failed. Well, they were trying, especially in Berlin, endlessly. What's the sort of condition of artists in relation with the scene?
I think one useful way of thinking about artists is that we're borrowing from everywhere, like from different knowledge traditions, from different creative traditions, from different literary and practice-based traditions. So you could think of an artist as an epistemic nihilist, like they don't really need to believe in the thing which you put on the card. Like it's merely a concept which we're borrowing, we're playing with it. We're not necessarily having to get married to it. So again, it's coming back to the point I was making that art can go places that like straight discourse can't, because the different, like they've got more modes of engagement possible. So maybe there's like a trickster move that art can make that other disciplines can't. What I would say about the people in the intersection of crypto and art, of which I'm, among many friends, is that mostly people are coming, like the order of process is that they're artists and they arrive in this new paradigm or this new community, and they set about seeing how they can use their skills or their critical faculties or the new mediums that are emerging to do whatever it is, whether that's kind of, earnest work or critical engagement or whatever. I think what's rarer to see is people coming from the technical sphere and then moving more towards the creative. And there are a few people like that in the crypto art world. I think it's interesting because they bring a different set of perspectives and approaches, different sets of skills and experiences. But also the fact that it's possible, I think, is remarkable. So one of the good things about crypto is we really don't have as many intermediaries or gatekeepers or people kind of excluding you from being able to participate in and access the thing. So it means that people like me can kind of wander in and be like, oh, I'm going to make some art now. And then like, here it is. Whereas if I tried to do that through a traditional gallery structure, it would probably have been harder. For example, this European Commission funding that we got, it was literally the first thing we applied to as the salon. And they were like, we're seeing this is crazy, we don't understand it, but all the other projects sucked so bad, so can you just don't screw it up? So it also kind of speaks to there being quite a wide horizon of possibilities because it's new, because we don't know what the thing does yet. We don't know what we can do with it or how we can subvert it and twist it in interesting ways. Should we wrap? Yeah. Nice. Thanks, everybody. Bye.